This video is brought to you by Arma, who provides top quality supplements to athletes of all kinds. Riders like Nick Way, Chad Reed, Jeremy McGrath use them for pre, during, and post-activity applications. Be sure to head to armasport.com and use the code RACERX. That's RACERX, no spaces, for 20% off your first order.
How's it going, everybody? I am Kris Keefer. This is Mike Schalkoff. Took me a little while to learn that last name. That's Mike over there. And this is the 2021 Kawasaki KX250 intro at Perris Raceway. So for 2021, Kawasaki completely revamped their machine. Unlike the 450, where it had minimal changes, actually hardly anything, right? This thing is almost all brand new. When we talked to the guys at Kawasaki today, they said there's over 300 part numbers that involve this 2021 Kawasaki KX250. So when they told me 300 different part numbers on this thing, that tells me that there's not a lot of interchangeability between the 2020 and the 2021. So with that being said, I asked the R&D guys here today just some key things that I would want to know if I was buying this bike. On paper, it is actually a little bit heavier. Not much, but on paper it is a little bit heavier. But from what the guys told me, and I'll tell you guys here, the CG feeling is much lighter on the track. Another thing that I come to appreciate, this is not really a big deal to some of you guys, but Dunlop MX3S tires, they're still here. Kawasaki is one of the few companies that actually keep this tire on the machines. And I'm telling you guys right now, if you guys can order some of these tires through a Kawasaki part number, it's in your best interest. It's much better than the 33, and I'm glad Kawasaki did this. So with saying that, I brought Mike in here. He's more of a 250 kind of rider. I'm old, I'm over 40, I'm 170 pounds, I'm lazy. I'm not a 250 guy, I'll admit that, but I do like to ride 250s that are good and have some power. Lots of internal motor changes to this Kawasaki KX250. You come off of a 2017, 2019 hybrid. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the engine and what's better on this one compared to your bike that you have.
So right off the bat, when I started riding the bike, I noticed that it really revved out a lot further. The mid to top on this bike, the 21, is so much better than the 19 engine. Off the bottom, right away, I'd say it felt a little weak, but we made some changes later on in the day, and it really brought this thing to life.
Yeah, so for me, it has a free engine feel. Like if I want to compare it to something, and let's say a YZ250F, it has more of a heavy, draggy, more torque on a Yamaha. This has a more playful, maybe not as much torque down low like a Yamaha, but very exciting, snappy throttle response. That really hasn't changed that much for 2021. Where Kawasaki really wanted to focus their attention was mid-range meat and top-end over-rev. And for me, I mean, I've not put a ton of time in the 2020 KX250, but I've ridden it enough to know that you haven't got a lot more bottom end with this engine, but the pulling power out of area 3 in that corner, when you're shifting your weight back, it pulls, and it pulls far. So me being an older guy, I can be a little bit lazier because second gear pulls longer. So I guess, could you agree with that?
Yeah, no, second gear definitely pulled long.
Yeah, so for me, I still can't use third gear and lug it like a Yamaha YZ250F, but man, this thing is peppy, is exciting, and that was with the green coupler. So we start, obviously you guys know Kawasaki has that coupler system. Black is more of a rich setting, green is standard, then you have white that's leaner. Most of us, Mike as well, he went to a white coupler setting, and you thought it hit a little bit harder. You liked that originally.
Yeah, no, originally coming out of the corners, I wasn't able to really get the RPMs where I wanted to, so I was using the clutch a lot. When we went to the white coupler, that definitely minimized the amount of the time I need to use on the clutch, but yeah, the power was good all around.
So for me, in the world of testing, that's called recovery, what he's talking about. When you fan the clutch a little bit and you're trying to, maybe you make a mistake coming in the corner, and instead of downshifting, you're just like, that's a two-stroke sound, but you get the point. That is recovery. As soon as that thing, you start clutching it and get that thing back up in the RPMs, this bike does this much better than 2020. I like that. So me and Mike over here, we tried a different map with the Kawasaki FI calibration tool. Kawasaki offers this as an accessory. You can buy this, and you can change your mapping within a coupler. So we ended the day on the black coupler, but we call this the Chaw map. Chaw works at Kawasaki. Mike Chavez, who was Bradshaw's mechanic, he came up with this map that almost blended Mike and I's favorite maps together. So he liked the white coupler. I was more of the green coupler guy. I'll post this up. You can go to keyfringtesting.com. I'll have this map up there. But it blended, got a little bit more added meat down low and stretched the power further. You rode it and you're like, wow.
Yeah, no, right away, I realized that I was able to pull out of the corners really well. It really brought the bottom end to the bike. And at the same time, usually when you do that, you're losing a little bit on mid and top. But realistically, once we put that map in the bike, I'd say all around, it brought power all the way through the RPMs.
Yeah, I agree. Like, usually there's a negative to something. You do something better and you get worse somewhere else. To me, it brought everything up and just kept good rear wheel traction, brought excitement up and pulling power. So Chavez map, it's a good map. Also, what you'll notice a little bit more, I don't want to say more top end, but it'll just pull a little bit farther than the 2020 version. It feels like the R&D guys or the engineers over at Kawasaki had a KTM in mind when they built this engine character. They wanted to rev, they wanted to pull far. I had my son out here today, he's 14, he likes to rev it and scrub. It fits that type of rider as well. And I was pretty happy. Perris is kind of tight, clay-based. And for me, second and third gear was really good. I think the transmission spacing is a little bit, there's a gap between second and third, but second gear is so usable that, man, I really had a smile on my face all day just because how good it pulled out of the corner. So going with the longer pulling power theme, what did you think about, you mentioned something earlier to me about gearing, so what do you think about that?
So in years past on this bike, I've always felt like I needed to go down a tooth in the rear, really just to make that second gear and even the third gear a little bit longer. On this one, I would maybe even go to tooth up. It really revved out a lot further. I think even throwing a 51 on it would maybe even be the way to go.
Maybe if you guys are looking for a little bit more bottom end, go the Jody route. We always talk about the Jody. The Jody is one tooth up. That's famous for MXA. You guys know this. So 51 tooth, get a little bit more grunt out of the corners. If you're a little bit of a heavier guy, that could also be an option. But to me, if you're used to a 2020 KX250, that bottom end remains the same. It's not the most bottom end in class, but man, that mid and top end transition now, it's up there with KTM and Husqvarna. Chassis. I have a lot to say about this, but if you have some things to say about cornering, man, I'm a fan of Kawasaki and their frame character. I've talked about this before, but for me, this bike feels pretty light.
It felt amazingly light, and like for them to tell us that it was a lot heavier, well, not a lot, but a little bit heavier than the older models, I was a little surprised by that because when I got on the bike, it did not feel it at all. So
yeah, for me too. Sorry to cut you off, but for me, like it was the 2020, that lean angle, that first initial lean, it's kind of lethargic, a little bit of lazy. This thing's really like hyperactive, and not hyperactive in a Honda way, but just like it reacts to your movement quickly. I like that there's stability. I told these guys here today, I'm more of a slow cornering machine type of guy. Maybe if my machine corners a little bit slower, I don't mind it as much because I can get into the corner better because it's stable. This thing has a nice blend of both. It feels light, it has good area one lean in traction, and then straight line stability is excellent. So we messed with the fork a little bit today just because I want a little bit more hold up. But for me, when they told us, and this is after I rode a little bit, they told me it was a little bit heavier, and I was like, wow, because it doesn't feel like it. So along with the engine changes as well, the new chassis, I like this thing a lot. Suspension, let's break this thing down really quick. You're 100 and...
Right now about 165.
He's a working man now, so he's
Yeah,
gaining a little weight.
office job.
So tell me about the suspension box stock. You've mentioned earlier how much you like this compared to your other stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm coming off the SFF show stuff from the older model bikes.
That is bad. That is no good.
Yeah, I had a pretty good setting, I feel like, with that stuff. But right away, I noticed that this stuff was a lot more plush. It wasn't as, I guess, the way I would describe it is like that. It's not as sharp as the SFF stuff felt in, like that's
like
real,
edgy.
Yeah, it was real like edgy, I guess,
Yeah.
sharp.
For me, like this is a KYB setup. He's talking about more of a Showa setup.
Yeah.
I hated that fork. I will tell you straight up. Like, I did not like it. You might have had a lot of work done to it, but KYB is known for a little bit more movement in the fork and the shock. It moves more. It follows the ground better. There's always a little bit more comfort with KYB stuff. Showa has better performance. Like when you slam it in things, it holds up a little bit more. I just went 2 clicks in on the compression. I had Mike ride the same setting as me, and we actually had the same sag. We started out with his sag earlier. I thought it was too low. I set the sag for me at 103, 102, and he rode the rest of the day, and we adjusted it just from high speed. So he thought it was a little bit high coming into corners. I backed out the high speed a quarter turn, and it settled enough for use, which is what we call track toughness. That says something about this bike. You can adjust it for you and for me, and I feel like when I watch you ride a little bit different, but you can still be, awful aggressive.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess that's just kind of why I'm more comfortable on the 250 rather than the 450 is I ride that way on a 450. I get thrown to the ground pretty quick.
So the KYB fork is superb. We talked about this earlier with everybody. If this fork, for me, came on the KX450, I might have a little bit of a more liking to the bike. The 450 dives a little bit, and this does too, but what's weird is if it dives, there's still a lot of control. There's a lot of dampening. I like that. I noticed when I slapped into stuff, there was a nice amount of front end traction. Lean angle traction was nice. Maybe just a little bit soft for me. But overall, very balanced. I didn't really mess with the shock at all. 102, 103 millimeters sag, and I thought the stuff was good. Like I said, you can see these guys working out here. It wasn't terribly rough. We'll ride it more to see how it reacts on rougher conditions, but overall, well balanced. You can kind of get a sniff of what this thing's going to be about. It's going to be a lot about control and dampening, so I like that. For the brakes, we don't talk about brakes a lot unless they're bad, right? So brakes is like no news is good news unless they're really good or they're really bad. The front brake is fine. It faded a little bit today. I'm a front brake dragger in these ruts. We talked about earlier how we just constantly rode this thing all day, so it made a little bit spongy at the end of the day. But for me, the rear brake, when they went down on this rear disc, was much better. So we went down to a 240 mil disc. It's not as grabby and it's not as squeaky. I squeaked a lot of the rear brakes last year, especially on the 450. This thing, 240 mil, modulation's a little bit better. I'm glad they did that. Ergonomics. How tall are you?
5'7".
I'm 6 foot, so there's a little bit of difference here. Kawasaki is great with adjustability. You can move the bars around, you can move the pegs, you can adjust that. I never really do. I'm in that range where the stock stuff feels pretty good, and now when they have a Renthal fat bar, it's way better. Fat bar doesn't flex as much as the 7/8, but it's okay because the bend is much better. Ergonomics, to me, is huge. Being 5'7", how do you feel on this bike?
I felt like I fit the bike perfect, honestly. Like, right away, because I'm obviously not riding a Cowie at the moment, and right when I got on the thing, it just felt at home for me again, at least. Like, I'd say being 5'7" is perfect height for this bike.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, 5'7" between 6 foot, that's a big variance. And he's saying that he was comfortable, I was comfortable. Honda always has really good ergonomics. To me, when I sit on this thing, this feels really Honda-ish. Skinny, narrow, flat on top, barred, obviously the same as the new Honda now. We have the hydraulic clutch, which still not a fan of the levers. They're kind of narrow. I don't know if you noticed that, but for me, this hydraulic clutch is not as smooth as the 450 clutch. From what I've gathered, they use a judder spring within this system still. So what I noticed when I roll my corners, it was a little bit on-off feeling with this hydraulic system versus the 450, but nonetheless, no fade. It was consistent. I just wish Kawasaki would change the lever shapes a little bit sharp and narrow for me. Overall, man, it's a better Kawasaki. I'm gonna have fun with this. I'm gonna really try to ride 250s more in 2021 because I've said this before on the KTM one. Is like I have a lot of fun riding these bikes. It's super fun. So you can throw them around. They feel light. I didn't get the chance to do it. I think you did better whips than I did today.
There wasn't really any jumps to throw whips
I just
on,
feel like this tabletop was way better for you. So fun bike to ride. The question is, before we wrap this sucker up, I know it's been a long video for you guys. Hang in there. Would you purchase this motorcycle with your own money? And I mean, granted, you're a monster guy, so don't use the monster thing for the Kawasaki. Would you buy this?
I still might be buying one. But yeah, no, I think this is going to be my bike going in the next year. Actually, probably in like a month.
He's from East Coast, Jersey.
Yeah.
So he's got way better dirt than we do out here. So how do you think, just forecasting this, how do you think this bike would work in the ruts back east?
Well, surprisingly, this thing really had a good front end bite coming into the corners, and they're pretty blown out. So coming into somewhere you got some traction, a little bit of tacky dirt, I think it's going to grab really well. And
that's a good point Mike made. Like, this thing has always been kind of rear wheel biased. Seems more front end biased to me than ever for 2021.
I'd say so.
Yeah.
But also, like, even just looking at it now after you pointed out before, my old bike, it really dropped down right here. I guess what you call the rider triangle all the time. It looks like you're a little bit higher up in the seat now. I don't know about the foot peg placement, but the drop from the handlebars look closer to the gas tank than in years past, at least for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said earlier, it's a flatter surface. You're on top of it more. The bar bend feels nice. He's 5'7", I'm almost 6 foot. So overall, really pleasant experience for me here at Perris Raceway today with the Kawasaki. Kudos to the R&D guys. We do these videos and we talk about the bike, but I come from that background. I know how much work it is on both sides, the American side and the Japanese side, to get together and make a strong motorcycle. So congratulations to Kawasaki. They're doing a great job in 2021. The 450 is an amazing bike. Man, I see this rating really high in the shootouts as well. So just to add a little bonus feature here, I guess this is bonus content. Son Aiden, he's 14, just started riding again. He's a 250F guy, but he hasn't really been a KX250, right? You really haven't ridden KX250s?
No, I haven't. I've only ridden Hondas and Yamahas.
So he rode this today. Just got off with a broken wrist, but besides him being happy that he's riding a dirt bike, he loved this Kawasaki. So you ride a Honda. Heather purchased him another bike, another color. Shouldn't say what brand. And but you really liked the Kawasaki Power.
I did, honestly. It felt bottom end wise, like coming out of a corner, it felt like it just hit harder than my Honda did. So,
and I guess excitement for 14-year-old kids, they like that exciting feel. They want it to rev. Although you're a smoother type of rider, thank God for my pocketbook. You look good on the Cowie. I was actually pleasantly surprised. I watched you, and you looks like it fits you well. Honestly, it looks like it fits you better than the Honda because of how you're sitting on the bike.
my posture wise.
Yeah, rider triangle. You know what that is?
I did, and I forgot.
So it's the handlebar. So it's the seat, foot peg, handlebar. When you sit on the bike, how do you feel?
I feel like the bars were a little too high compared to my Honda that I ride with, but other than that, it felt comfortable. It didn't feel like the bars were in my lap. It felt nice and spacey.
So you would want a little bit lower bar.
Yes, a little bit lower bar.
So if we were going to go buy you a machine, would you be happy if we came home with a KX250 for you?
I would, honestly. I feel like this is a good bike to start out with, too, for any other kid that's also getting on 250.
That's a good point, too, because it's stable. It's not twitchy. And yes, it does have some good hit down low, but it's not so much like a YZ250F. He tried a YZ250F, and he felt like it was too much bike. Obviously, watching you ride today wasn't too much bike for you, so Team Green.
Team Green.
Stay tuned for more videos at racerxonline.com. If you guys want to subscribe to the magazine, you can get a free t-shirt, some stickers, all kinds of stuff. It's a good magazine. Check it out. And we'll be back more. Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Keefer, for bringing me out here. Thank you, Racer X, and thank you, everyone else.
Monster Energy guy. See you later.